I'm going to go over real quick on binding your radio. Just so you know, you don't need to bind your radio. For some reason, people think when they get this that that's the first thing that they should do. We've bound it, it's all done, it's all ready to fly, we've test flown it. The receiver and the transmitter are working together, everything's cool, but sometimes, somehow, I don't know what it is, but our customers seem to lose the bind, and I've seen it happen. So when you do lose your bind, what happens is on your receiver, you have two solid lights that should be solid. And if you have your transmitter on, like I do here, and these lights are flashing yellow, that means that you've lost your bind. So when these lights are flashing, and if you turn this on or off or whatever you're doing and it doesn't do anything, you've lost your bind. If you turn your transmitter on and these lights are solid yellow, you're good to go. So if you turn your radio off and these lights just turn off and there's no lights, that's normal. Then when you turn your radio back on, these lights should go solid again. If they're flashing, in either way, if that's on or off and they're still flashing, you've lost your bind. So we have what's called a bind plug. And if you look at your receiver very closely, there is one port in here that says power bind or data bind. And in that port, that's where we're going to put the bind plug. And I'll show you how to do that real quick. Okay, so I have determined with the very small writing that is on this receiver that on the very top of this receiver is where I would plug the bind plug in. So I would plug that in. You're going to have all of your other DJI stuff plugged into this. So this slot will not be used for anything except for data and bind. So plug that in there. And as you can see, it's just making a loop. So it's just connecting this, and that means that we're good to go ahead and bind it now. So we're going to power this up with our battery. We're going to turn on the we're going to actually power this up first. So to be safe, I suggest taking the props off when you're binding this, because who knows what signal it might pull. So you're going to power this up first by plugging in your big battery to the ESCs, and that's going to power up your whole system. And all this stuff is going to remain plugged in. You don't have to take this out. Don't think that you do, because when you try to put this back in, you could really mess things up. You can leave this in while you're binding it. Just make sure you take your props off so you don't get cut up if it does decide to turn on. This will basically you can turn that on. Those should be flashing still. Then you're going to take your radio. Depending on which radio, I'll show you on both of them. This bind is actually this top button right here. So I'm going to hold this down. Make sure all your switches are in the right place. You're going to turn on your radio, and it's going to say bind on the screen right there. And then as soon as those yellow lights start flashing, you're going to give it like 1, 2, 3 seconds and let it go. These lights on here are going to turn solid at that point. So you did it, you bound it, but you're not finished yet. You have to remove that plug. So we're going to power everything down. First, take the battery off of the quad. You're going to power the quad off. You're going to remove the bind plug out of that slot. Very important. A lot of people don't remember to do that, and then they're like, well, how come it doesn't fly? Won't fly with that thing in there. Now you can power your radio up first, like we normally do, like you should do. So the radio's on, and then we're going to power up our quad right here. And you can see underneath here, we have a solid light here and a solid light there. And those two solid lights are telling me that I have a good bind. And so that's basically how you do it. I'm going to show you real quick with the DX8 how you do it. Same process. Sorry. So I'm going to show you real quick with the DX6i how you do it. So it's the same process. Very simple. There's a bind. Actually, yeah. Use the timer switch. I thought it said bind on there, but it doesn't. So the timer switch is going to be what you use to bind on this one. So same process. Bind plug in there. You're going to hold your timer switch forward, and you're going to turn the radio on. You hear it beeping. It's going to say bind. Let it go for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Let it go. those lights should turn solid. Same thing, don't forget to remove your bind plug. It's a pretty simple process, and I think you guys can handle it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us and or give us a call, and have fun flying.